There's a quiet question many people carry, but rarely say out loud. If money is supposed to make life feel safer, why does it disappear so easily from one generation to the next? History is full of fortunes that rose fast and vanished just as quickly. Families that had everything: status, property, power, only to leave nothing behind but stories. And then there are others. Families who were never flashy, never loud, often overlooked, yet somehow they managed to stay financially grounded across centuries of uncertainty. The Jewish experience forces us to confront this contrast. For most of history, Jewish communities lived without guarantees. They faced displacement, restrictions, sudden loss of property, and constant uncertainty. There were no stable systems to rely on. No assurance that what you built would still be yours tomorrow. And yet, something remarkable happened. Again and again, Jewish families rebuilt, not always with more money, but with more continuity. They didn't just recover, they endured. Their wealth didn't peak dramatically. It persisted quietly. That alone should make us pause, because it suggests something uncomfortable. Maybe wealth isn't destroyed by bad luck. Maybe it's destroyed by how we define it. In many Jewish traditions, money was never treated as a symbol of success. It was treated as a responsibility, something that needed to be managed carefully, explained to children early, and protected from emotional decision-making. Wealth wasn't about the individual moment. It was about the family timeline. Decisions weren't made to feel rich today. They were made to avoid being desperate tomorrow. This created a very different financial posture. Yet instead of chasing visibility, they prioritized portability. Instead of maximizing gains, they minimized ruin. Instead of asking, "How much can I make?" they asked, "How long can this last?" Small businesses were repeated across generations. Skills were passed down alongside values. Education was treated as a form of wealth no one could confiscate. Spending was restrained not out of fear, but out of foresight. Nothing about it looked impressive in the moment. That was the point. Quiet wealth doesn't demand attention. It demands patience. And patience, when repeated over decades, becomes power. This video isn't about copying a culture or romanticizing history. It's about observing a pattern that worked under the harshest conditions imaginable, and asking what it might teach us today in a world obsessed with speed, visibility, not in short-term wins. You'll hear small stories, modest choices, principles that don't sound exciting but keep showing up in families whose financial lives didn't collapse when circumstances changed. If you've ever felt that working harder hasn't made life feel more secure, if you've ever wondered why some people seem calm around money while others stay anxious no matter how much they earn, this perspective may change how you see wealth entirely, not as something to display, but as something to quietly carry forward. And if this way of thinking feels grounding to you, if it feels like a calmer, more durable alternative, share this video with someone you care about who might need it. Sometimes the most life-changing ideas are the ones that arrive quietly at exactly the right moment. Chapter 1. Wealth was treated as a responsibility, not a trophy. There is a quiet difference between families who become wealthy for a moment and families who remain financially stable for generations. It is not intelligence, it is not opportunity. It is how wealth is treated once it appears. In many places, wealth is viewed as a reward, a finish line, something earned after years of effort and therefore something to enjoy, display, and upgrade life around. Houses get larger, lifestyles expand. Money becomes proof that the struggle meant something. But in Jewish families across history, wealth carried a very different meaning. It was not a trophy. It was a responsibility. This perspective did not come from philosophy books. It came from lived experience. For long stretches of history, Jewish families knew that stability was fragile. Businesses could be shut down. Property could be confiscated. Entire communities could be forced to move. When life teaches you that permanence is an illusion, you stop confusing success with safety. So money was handled carefully. There is a story often repeated in different forms across generations. A man runs a modest trading business. One year, conditions are favorable and profits are unusually strong. Friends suggest that it's finally time to upgrade, to move, to spend more freely, to let success show. He declines. When asked why, his answer is calm and practical. Because this year is not a guarantee. That sentence captures the mindset perfectly. Wealth was never evaluated by its peak. It was evaluated by how well it could withstand decline. A good year did not change behavior, not because behavior built for good years often collapses in bad ones. In many Jewish households, children learned early that money did not belong to the individual alone. What you earned was tied to the family as a whole, including people not yet born. Decisions made today could either protect or endanger those who came later. That awareness removed ego from money. When wealth is a trophy, spending becomes emotional. It becomes a reward, a release, a signal. But when wealth is a responsibility, spending becomes deliberate. Every decision carries a quiet question. Does this strengthen the family's position or weaken it? Consider a family that operates a small manufacturing business over decades. Income grows slowly but steadily. They could afford a more luxurious lifestyle, but they choose consistency instead. The same home, predictable expenses, comfortable but restrained. To outsiders, it looks unambitious. Inside the family, something else is happening. Cash reserves grow quietly. Risk stays controlled. The business remains flexible. When downturns come, and they always do, the family doesn't panic. They adjust. They were never optimizing for appearance. They were optimizing for survival. Another story often shared quietly involves inheritance. In many Jewish families, money was not handed down suddenly or generously. It was introduced carefully, often later in life. Children were taught about money long before they were allowed to control it. One father explained his thinking this way: if money arrives before responsibility, it teaches entitlement. If responsibility arrives first, money becomes manageable. So children learned through observation, and they saw how decisions were made during both good times and hard times. They learned that income could fluctuate without changing character. Money was discussed openly, but without excitement or fear. This emotional neutrality was critical. When money is tied to identity, losing it feels like personal failure. When money is tied to responsibility, loss feels like a problem to solve. That difference determines whether families collapse under pressure or adapt. Even success was treated cautiously. A profitable period did not automatically justify expansion. Businesses grew slowly, new commitments were added reluctantly. Debt was approached with skepticism, not because growth was feared, but because dependency was. There was an unspoken rule guiding many decisions. Do not build a life that requires everything to go right. So that rule prevented countless collapses. Families that treated wealth as a trophy often expanded their lives to match income. Fixed costs rose, obligations hardened. When income dipped, panic followed. But families that treated wealth as a responsibility kept their lives adaptable. They could pause, they could wait, they could survive. This mindset also shaped how wealth was discussed publicly. Talking openly about money was considered unnecessary and risky. It attracted envy, expectations, and pressure. None of those helped protect stability, so wealth stayed understated. Not hidden out of fear, not denied out of guilt, but kept quiet out of wisdom. So one subtle consequence of this approach was how it stretched time horizons. Decisions were rarely made for immediate gratification. Instead, they were filtered through a longer lens. How will this choice affect the next stage and the one after that? Short-term excitement rarely survived that filter. This discouraged reckless risk. It discouraged lifestyle inflation. It discouraged spending driven by emotion rather than need. Over time, it encouraged habits that looked ordinary but compounded powerfully. Children raised in this environment grew up calm around money. They did not associate it with excitement or anxiety. It was neutral, useful, important, but not central to self-worth. They learned that wealth was not something you used to feel important. It was something you used to keep life stable. That calm became an invisible asset. And what does this mean for someone living today? It means that wealth is not defined by how impressive your life looks, but by how resilient it is. It means asking different questions, not "what can I afford?" but "what does this choice commit me to?" Not "will this feel good now?" but "will this still feel manageable if conditions change?" Treating wealth as a responsibility means resisting the pressure to perform success. It means keeping margin in your life, financially and emotionally. It means understanding that the most dangerous moment is often when things are going well. The lesson is simple, but uncomfortable. If your lifestyle depends on constant success, it is fragile. If your wealth can only survive perfect conditions, it will not survive reality. The families who endured understood this early. They removed ego from money, and they slowed down decisions. They prioritized continuity over applause, and by doing so, they gave wealth the one thing it needs to last: time. Chapter 2. Knowledge was the first asset passed down. Long before money was trusted to the next generation, something else was carefully transferred first. It didn't sit in safes, it couldn't be confiscated, and it didn't depend on geography, markets, or political stability. That asset was knowledge. In Jewish families across generations, understanding always preceded ownership. Children were not prepared to receive money. They were prepared to recreate it if necessary. This distinction explains why wealth could disappear and return again without panic. Learning was not treated as abstract education. It was treated as preparation for real life. There is a story that appears in many variations. A family runs a small trading operation. Grain, textiles, tools, basic goods. Nothing glamorous. The father brings his children into the business early, not to work, but to observe. They watch how prices are set, how disagreements are handled, how deals fall apart. One afternoon, a deal goes wrong. A partner backs out. The profit vanishes. Instead of anger, the father calmly explains what he missed: a bad assumption, a misread incentive. The children learn something more valuable than success: how failure is analyzed. Years later, one of those children runs a business of their own. When a similar situation arises, they recognize it instantly. Not because they studied a book, but because they lived the pattern. This is how knowledge compounds. In many Jewish households, business discussions were part of daily life. Not sanitized, not hidden. Children heard arguments, negotiations, calculations, and regrets. And they learned that money decisions were rarely clean or perfect. And that was normal. This created adults who were comfortable with uncertainty. Another recurring story involves families who were forced to relocate suddenly. Physical assets were lost or abandoned. What remained were skills, languages, trade knowledge, accounting, negotiation. Within a short time, these families found ways to earn again. Not because someone helped them, but because they understood how value moved through systems. They knew what people needed. They knew how to price fairly. They knew how to rebuild trust. That kind of recovery does not come from optimism. It comes from preparation. In Jewish families, asking questions was encouraged early. Children were not trained to memorize answers, but to challenge assumptions. Why does this work? What happens if conditions change? Who benefits if this rule stays in place? These habits translated directly into business. Instead of chasing exciting opportunities, families trained this way focused on understanding structures, how revenue actually flowed, where leverage existed, where risk hid quietly. This prevented them from being seduced by surface-level success. One family story illustrates this well. A profitable operation was offered rapid expansion through borrowed capital. The numbers looked impressive. Growth was fast. Returns were high, assuming everything went right. The family declined. Not because they didn't understand the upside, but because they understood the downside too clearly. Stories from previous generations had taught them what leverage did when conditions shifted. They chose slower growth over fragility. Years later, when highly leveraged competitors collapsed, that decision looked less conservative and more precise. Another important pattern was how mistakes were treated. Failure was not dramatized, it was examined. Children learned that mistakes were not shameful, but repeating them was expensive. After a bad investment, conversations focused on assumptions, not blame. What did we think would happen? Why did that belief exist? What signal did we ignore? This created adults who adjusted quickly without losing confidence. In families where money was inherited before understanding, fear dominated. In families where understanding came first, money was simply a variable. Education itself was approached differently. Learning was not about credentials or prestige. It was about utility. Reading, arithmetic, logic, a language. These were tools that could generate income under almost any conditions. There are many documented stories of families who arrived in new places with little more than books and skills. Within a generation, they were economically stable again. Not flashy, not dominant, but secure. That security came from competence, not capital. Another quiet advantage came from understanding systems rather than memorizing rules. Children were taught why certain practices worked, not just that they did. This allowed them to adapt when rules changed. They didn't freeze, they recalibrated. One merchant father explained it simply. If you only follow instructions, you break when instructions disappear. If you understand the system, you can move. That lesson explains how wealth could vanish and reappear across generations without emotional collapse. Knowledge also shaped how risk was evaluated. Families trained to think critically were less impressed by novelty. They distinguished between opportunity and speculation, between growth and gambling. This saved them from catastrophic losses that erased others completely. Over time, this created emotional stability around money. Gains didn't create euphoria. Losses didn't create panic. Both were treated as information. This stability was a competitive advantage. Money without understanding creates fragility. Understanding without money creates possibility. Jewish families consistently chose the second. What does this mean for someone living today? It means that the most important asset you can pass on or build for yourself is not money. There's its judgment, the ability to analyze situations calmly, to ask better questions, to understand how value is created and destroyed. It means involving the next generation not just in success, but in decision-making. Letting them see mistakes, letting them hear reasoning, teaching them how to think, not what to buy. In a world obsessed with shortcuts, this lesson is easy to ignore. But history is clear. Wealth that lasts is rarely built on information alone. It is built on understanding that travels, adapts, and rebuilds when everything else fails. That was the second pillar of quiet, generational wealth, and it's one that still works today. Chapter 3. Survival always came before maximum gain. There is a moment in every business, every investment, every career, when someone is tempted to go all in. The numbers look good. The timing feels right. Others are moving fast, making money, expanding aggressively. Standing still feels like falling behind. Across generations, Jewish families learned to treat that moment with extreme caution, not because opportunity was rare, but because survival was sacred. For communities that lived through repeated disruptions, the greatest financial mistake was not earning too little. It was building systems that only worked when everything went right. Maximum gain often required perfect conditions. Survival did not. This belief shaped how risk was approached. There is a recurring family story told in many variations. Seeing a small business, often trade-related, operates steadily for years. Margins are modest but reliable. Then a new opportunity appears, a chance to expand quickly into a new market, higher profits, faster growth, the kind of opportunity that feels like a turning point. Younger members are excited. Why not take it? Why not scale? Older members hesitate. They don't argue with the upside. They ask a different question. What happens if this fails? Not theoretically, practically. What happens if prices move against us? What happens if a partner disappears? What happens if regulations change? What happens if we can't exit cleanly? If the answer threatens the family's ability to recover, the deal is declined. To outsiders, this looks overly conservative, even timid. But time reveals the logic. Families who survived long enough learned that one bad decision can erase decades of progress. Avoiding ruin mattered more than chasing exceptional returns. There are many documented patterns of Jewish merchants who deliberately chose smaller profits in exchange for predictability. They avoided industries that depended on a single supplier. They avoided customers who required extended credit. They avoided rapid expansion that created fixed costs they couldn't unwind. Instead of building one large operation, they built several smaller ones. Instead of concentrating capital, they spread it. This was not modern diversification theory. It was survival thinking. If one stream failed, others kept flowing. Another story appears repeatedly. A family watches competitors grow rich quickly by borrowing heavily. New buildings, new ventures, new obligations. Everything looks impressive until conditions shift. Demand drops, credit tightens. Suddenly, the same leverage that fueled growth accelerates collapse. The aggressive families disappear. The cautious ones remain. They never dominated headlines, but they didn't vanish either. Debt, in particular, was treated with deep respect, not fear, but seriousness. Borrowed money reduced flexibility. It tied the future to assumptions about stability. For families who had seen stability disappear overnight, that was dangerous. So leverage was used sparingly. When it was used, it was structured so that failure would not destroy the family. Worst-case scenarios were not ignored. They were discussed openly. One guiding principle appeared again and again. Never build a structure that collapses if one assumption breaks. This principle extended beyond business into lifestyle. Families avoided commitments that required constant high income. Expenses were kept manageable even during good times. This created breathing room. When conditions tightened, they didn't panic. They adjusted. Another subtle but powerful pattern involved reserves. During profitable years, a portion of gains was set aside, not reinvested aggressively, not spent, but reserved. These reserves were not optimized for returns. They were optimized for endurance. This created optionality. When downturns arrived, families with reserves could wait. They didn't have to sell assets at the worst moment. They didn't have to accept bad deals out of desperation. Waiting is one of the most underrated advantages in finance. Families chasing maximum gain rarely had this option. Everything was reinvested. Not everything depended on momentum. When momentum slowed, collapse followed. The difference wasn't knowledge, it was priority. Survival first thinking also shaped how families viewed risk emotionally. Risk was not framed as bravery or boldness. It was framed as responsibility. Taking excessive risk with family resources was not admired, it was questioned. This cultural framing mattered deeply. When risk is glorified, people stretch beyond safety. When survival is honored, people respect limits. Those limits protect continuity. There are also stories of families deliberately choosing to remain smaller than they could have been. Scale brought complexity. Complexity brought exposure. Exposure brought attention. Attention brought risk. Smaller operations were easier to manage, easier to adapt, and easier to rebuild. Growth was welcomed, but only if it did not reduce flexibility. This mindset confused outsiders. Why not expand when success was obvious? Because obvious success attracts pressure. Another recurring pattern involved trends. Jewish families were rarely early adopters of financial fads. By the time an opportunity was widely celebrated, they often avoided it entirely. Popularity signaled risk, not safety. This prevented them from participating in many speculative booms. They missed dramatic gains, but they also avoided dramatic losses. Over generations, this discipline compounded quietly. Families that survived every downturn eventually found themselves ahead, not because they won big, but because they never lost everything. Survival creates time. Time creates opportunity. In a world obsessed with optimization, this lesson feels uncomfortable. We are taught to maximize, accelerate, and scale. But history offers a quieter truth. Wealth that lasts is built by those who refuse to gamble with survival. What does this mean for someone living today? It means rethinking what success actually requires. It means understanding that the most dangerous moment financially is often when things are going well. That's when overconfidence sets in. That's when commitments harden. That's when flexibility disappears. The lesson is not to avoid opportunity. It's to examine downside before celebrating upside. Ask different questions. What breaks if this fails? How quickly can I recover? Does this choice increase or reduce my flexibility? Maximum gain is seductive. Survival is boring. But boring is what lasts. The families who endured understood this deeply. They accepted slower growth in exchange for permanence. They chose resilience over excitement. They designed their financial lives to withstand stress, not just success. That mindset is still relevant today. Because in the long run, the people who stay in the game the longest don't need extraordinary wins. Time eventually does the work for them. Chapter 4. Money moved through. Trust, not through exposure. One of the least visible advantages in long-lasting wealth is not money itself, but who money is allowed to move between. Across generations, Jewish families understood something that many people only learn after costly mistakes. Capital is safest when it travels through trust. This understanding did not come from idealism, it came from necessity. When formal protections were weak or unreliable, contracts alone were never enough. Legal systems changed, enforcement was inconsistent. Reputation, however, followed you everywhere. So families learned early that trust was not a social preference, it was financial infrastructure. There are countless stories of Jewish merchants operating across cities and regions without modern systems of enforcement. Goods moved, credit extended, and payments delayed, and yet transactions continued. Not because people were naive, but because trust networks were carefully guarded. A family would rather earn slightly less with someone reliable than earn more with someone unknown. That choice shaped everything. In many communities, business relationships overlapped with social ones. People prayed together, studied together, celebrated together. That proximity created accountability. Breaking trust did not just damage a deal, it damaged standing in the entire community. One merchant story appears again and again. A trader is offered a lucrative opportunity by an outsider. The terms look good, the margins are attractive, but the person is unknown to the network. No shared history, no mutual accountability. The trader declines. Instead, so he chooses a less profitable deal with someone whose behavior he has observed for years. Someone who has been consistent. Someone who values reputation more than a single win. On paper, this looks irrational. In reality, it protects continuity. Trust reduced uncertainty. It reduced monitoring costs. It reduced the need for aggressive enforcement. Deals moved faster because fewer safeguards were required. When disagreements arose, they were resolved through conversation rather than conflict. This created an environment where capital could circulate repeatedly without constant friction. Another common story involves informal lending within the community. Loans were extended without complex contracts. The terms were clear, but enforcement relied heavily on reputation. If someone failed to honor their word, and they didn't just lose access to money, they lost access to the network. That consequence mattered more than any legal penalty. Families taught their children early that trust was an asset you could spend only once. Lose it, and no amount of money could buy it back. That lesson shaped behavior far more effectively than rules ever could. This emphasis on trust also influenced how partnerships were chosen. Families avoided partners who chased quick wins, exaggerated results, or changed behavior under pressure. Consistency mattered more than charisma. Predictability mattered more than ambition. There are stories of businesses that grew slowly because partners refused to rush decisions. Meetings took time, discussions repeated, details were examined carefully. To outsiders, this looked inefficient. To insiders, it prevented misunderstandings that destroyed relationships. Trust took time to build. That time was considered an investment. Another subtle pattern emerges in how information was shared. Valuable insights about markets, pricing, or opportunities were not broadcast publicly. They circulated quietly within trusted circles. This wasn't secrecy for its own sake. It was protection against misuse. Information shared with the wrong person could be distorted, exploited, or turned against the community. So knowledge moved carefully, just like money. This created an internal advantage. Families within the network had access to better information sooner. They learned from each other's mistakes. They avoided repeating errors others had already paid for. Over time, this created collective intelligence. Trust networks also reduced the need for scale. And instead of growing large and impersonal, many businesses remained small but deeply connected. This allowed families to pivot quickly. If one opportunity faded, another emerged through relationships. Capital didn't sit idle. It circulated among people who understood each other's values and constraints. There are stories of families who lost businesses during upheaval but were quickly supported by others in the network. Not out of charity, but because helping someone recover preserved the strength of the entire system. A weakened member made the network weaker. This reciprocal mindset turned individual success into shared resilience. Trust also shaped behavior during conflict. Disputes were inevitable, but they were handled differently. The goal was rarely to win the argument. It was to preserve the relationship. Winning at the cost of trust was considered a loss. This restraint prevented many conflicts from escalating into permanent fractures. Children growing up in these environments absorbed these lessons naturally. They learned that how you make money matters just as much as how much you make. That shortcuts which damage trust are expensive, even if they pay well initially. They learned to ask not just, is this profitable, but who am I becoming by doing this? Over generations, this created families whose wealth moved quietly, efficiently, and repeatedly. Not because they had better deals, but because they had better relationships. The trust was the invisible channel through which money flowed. In contrast, families who sought exposure often found themselves isolated. Loud success attracted attention, but not necessarily support. When conditions shifted, those without trust networks faced problems alone. The difference was not morality, it was structure. What does this mean for someone living today? It means recognizing that money rarely fails on its own. It fails when relationships fail. It means understanding that the strongest financial opportunities often come through people who trust you, not platforms, not trends, not public hype. It means valuing reputation over reach, choosing partners carefully, moving slower if necessary to protect trust, asking not just, "What does this pay?" but "Who does this connect me to?" In a world that rewards visibility, and this lesson feels counterintuitive, we are encouraged to broadcast, to scale quickly, to maximize exposure. But history suggests a quieter path. Wealth that moves through trust moves farther. Build relationships that can survive stress. Protect your reputation like capital. Remember that the most valuable financial networks are not the largest ones, but the most reliable. That principle allowed families to rebuild again and again without starting from nothing. And it still works today. Chapter 5. Wealth was built through repetition, not breakthroughs. When people imagine generational wealth, they often picture a single moment that changed everything. A bold move, a lucky break, one decision that lifted a family into a different financial reality. These stories are exciting, but they are rarely how lasting wealth is actually built. In Jewish family histories, wealth almost never came from a breakthrough. It came from repetition, small actions done correctly, boring decisions repeated for decades, improvements so incremental they barely felt meaningful at the time. This approach didn't look impressive. That's why it worked. There is a familiar story told quietly across generations. A family runs the same type of business for years, sometimes decades. The work is ordinary. The margins are modest. Outsiders see no sign of exceptional success, but each generation makes small refinements. A slightly better supplier, a more efficient process, a tighter control on expenses, a clearer division of responsibilities. Nothing dramatic changes. Everything improves. The grandfather focused on reliability. The father focused on consistency. The children focused on efficiency. Over time, those small improvements compound into something powerful. Another recurring example involves craftsmanship-based trades. A family operates in tailoring, printing, food preparation, or repair. The business doesn't scale explosively, but the reputation improves year after year. Customers return, referrals increase. Pricing power grows slowly. No one calls this innovation. But it is durability. And families like this rarely chased new industries simply because they were fashionable. They didn't abandon what worked to pursue something unproven. Instead, they asked a quieter question: how can this be done a little better next year than it was this year? That question shaped behavior. There are stories of families who survived multiple economic cycles doing essentially the same work. While others jumped from opportunity to opportunity, they refined one narrow skill. When demand shifted, they adjusted details, not direction. They didn't reinvent themselves, they evolved. Another common pattern involved how profits were reinvested. Instead of seeking rapid expansion, families reinvested in stability, better tools, more reliable suppliers, training younger members earlier. Improvements that didn't increase revenue immediately, but reduced friction long-term. This kind of investment rarely shows quick returns, but it quietly raises the floor. When conditions worsen, businesses with a higher floor survive. Businesses built on momentum collapse. One story often shared involves a family that resisted the temptation to grow too fast. While competitors expanded locations aggressively, this family focused on perfecting operations in one place. Their growth was slow enough to feel almost stagnant. Then conditions changed. Competitors struggled with complexity and overhead. This family adjusted quickly. Their smaller size made them flexible. Their consistency built trust. When demand returned, they were still there. They didn't win the race early. They finished it. Repetition also shaped how families approached work ethic. Hard work was respected, but burnout was not celebrated. Families understood that sustainability mattered more than intensity. A business that exhausted its owners eventually failed, no matter how profitable it once was. So routines were built to last. Hours were long, but manageable. Expectations were high, but realistic. Children were taught that showing up consistently mattered more than heroic effort. This mindset protected families from cycles of overexertion followed by collapse. Another subtle pattern involved learning from previous generations. Mistakes were not erased from memory. They were documented informally, through stories, warnings, and repeated advice. Don't do it this way. We tried that once. This looks good at first, but here's what happens later. These lessons created guardrails, and each generation didn't need to learn everything from scratch. They inherited not just a business, but a map of what not to do. That prevented repeated errors that destroy wealth elsewhere. Repetition also showed up in financial habits. Saving was consistent, not reactive. Spending was predictable, not emotional. Investments were evaluated calmly, not impulsively. Nothing was rushed. This removed drama from money. Drama feels productive. Consistency actually is. Over decades, these habits created an advantage that was hard to compete with. Families who repeated small, sensible actions year after year eventually outpaced those who relied on sporadic wins. The difference was not speed. It was staying power. Families that waited for breakthroughs often waited forever. Families that focused on repetition accumulated progress quietly. There is a reason these stories feel unremarkable when told individually. Each action on its own seems too small to matter, but together, over time, they create a structure that is extremely hard to break. This is how wealth survived across generations without drawing attention. What does this mean for someone living today? It means questioning the obsession with dramatic change. It means recognizing that the desire for a breakthrough often masks impatience. It means understanding that most financial lives don't need reinvention. They need refinement. Instead of asking, what could change everything? Ask, what can be done slightly better this year than last year? Instead of chasing intensity, build consistency. Instead of seeking shortcuts, strengthen fundamentals. Repetition feels slow. That's its advantage. In a world addicted to speed, repetition creates distance. While others burn out or reset, those who repeat correctly keep moving forward. The lesson is not to avoid ambition. It's to anchor ambition in reality. Wealth that lasts is rarely built by one great decision. It is built by thousands of small ones made with patience and discipline. That approach may never feel exciting, but it has something far more valuable. Longevity. And over time, longevity quietly becomes wealth. Chapter 6. Spending was morale, not emotional. One of the fastest ways wealth disappears is not through bad investments, but through emotional spending. Purchases made to soothe anxiety, to reward exhaustion, to prove progress. Across generations, Jewish families learned, often the hard way, that money spent to regulate emotion rarely strengthens the future. So they separated spending from feeling. This distinction didn't come from moral preaching. It came from pattern recognition. Families noticed that when money followed emotion, outcomes became unpredictable. When money followed principle, outcomes stabilized. There is a story repeated in many households. A business has a strong year. Cash flow is healthy. stress finally eases. The temptation appears not to invest, but to exhale them through spending. New comforts, visible upgrades, and a sense that the struggle is over. Older family members pause the celebration. They don't deny enjoyment, they redirect it. Comfort is allowed, they say, but obligation comes first. Obligations to reserves, to employees, to family members who depend on stability, to future years that may not be kind. Spending, in this view, was not a personal release. It was a moral decision with consequences. Another familiar story involves households that lived well below what they could afford. The home was comfortable, not impressive. Clothes were practical, meals were generous but not extravagant. Outsiders assumed modest means. Insiders understood the choice. By keeping spending predictable, the family removed pressure. Income didn't need to perform miracles. A bad month didn't threaten dignity. A bad year didn't threaten survival. Emotional swings were muted because spending habits didn't swing. This calm was intentional. In many families, children were taught early that money had a purpose before it had a pleasure. A portion was set aside for security, a portion for education, a portion for community obligations. Only after those needs were met did discretionary spending enter the conversation. This order mattered. When pleasure comes first, everything else becomes fragile. When responsibility comes first, pleasure becomes safer. There are stories of parents refusing to indulge children not out of stinginess, but out of foresight. They understood that gratification without context teaches entitlement. So desires were discussed openly. "We could buy this," a parent might say, "Sir, but here's what it would cost us later." Children learned that every purchase had a trade-off. That lesson stayed with them. Another recurring pattern involved how families responded to stress. During difficult periods, spending tightened, but not out of panic. The adjustments were calm and temporary. No drama, no shame. When conditions improved, habits didn't rebound explosively. They returned to baseline. This prevented whiplash. Families that spent emotionally often swung between indulgence and restriction. That cycle created anxiety and guilt. Families that spent morally avoided extremes. Their relationship with money remained steady even when circumstances were not. Spending decisions were often discussed collectively. Not democratically, but transparently. Children heard why certain choices were made, why vacations were postponed, why upgrades waited. These explanations weren't just financial, they were ethical. They reinforced the idea that money served the family's long-term well-being, not momentary relief. One story illustrates this clearly. A family could afford a larger home. The children wanted it. The parents declined, not because they feared the cost, but because they feared the commitment. A larger home meant higher fixed expenses, more dependency on steady income, less flexibility. Years later, when a downturn forced others to downsize painfully, that family adjusted quietly. Their spending had already been aligned with reality. Another subtle but powerful habit involved charity. Giving was structured, not impulsive. It was planned and consistent. This taught children that generosity was not a response to guilt or abundance, but a responsibility built into the financial system. Giving anchored spending in values. This also prevented emotional hoarding. Families who gave consistently were less likely to cling to money out of fear. They trusted their systems because they had designed them intentionally. Over time, this approach created emotional neutrality around money. Spending was neither celebratory nor shameful. It was functional. That neutrality protected families from the most common financial mistakes: buying to feel better, to feel safer, or to feel seen. Money that must perform emotionally becomes volatile. Money that serves purpose becomes stable. Even during prosperous times, families resisted lifestyle inflation, They understood that each upgrade raised the floor of required income. Higher floors reduce resilience, lower floors increase it. So comforts increased slowly, if at all. This wasn't deprivation, it was design. Children raised in these environments learned that happiness didn't track spending. Satisfaction came from security, not excess. They grew up without the constant pressure to display success or keep up with others. That psychological freedom was priceless. Over generations, moral spending created a buffer against envy, comparisons, and fear. Families were less affected by what others had because their spending choices were anchored to internal principles, not external signals. This is why wealth lasted quietly. What does this mean for someone living today? And it means recognizing that many financial problems are emotional problems wearing financial disguises. It means noticing when spending is used to manage stress, reward exhaustion, or prove progress, and pausing. Ask different questions. Is this purchase reducing future pressure or increasing it? Is it aligned with my values or with my feelings in this moment? Will this make life steadier or just louder? Moral spending doesn't mean joyless living. It means intentional living. It means designing habits that hold up under stress, not just success. It means separating self-worth from consumption. In a world that encourages instant relief through spending, this lesson feels countercultural. But history suggests it works. When spending stops being emotional, money stops being fragile. When money stops being fragile, wealth has a chance to last. And that was the sixth pillar of quiet generational wealth. And it remains one of the most practical lessons anyone can apply today. Chapter 7. Wealth was meant to outlive the individual. One of the quietest but most powerful differences in how Jewish families approached wealth was this. Money was never meant to end with the person who earned it. For many people, financial goals stop at the self. Earn enough. Live comfortably. Retire well. Everything beyond that feels abstract or optional. But across generations of Jewish families, wealth was viewed on a longer timeline. Decisions were made not just for the present life, but for lives that had not yet begun. This long view changed behavior in ways that are easy to miss, but impossible to ignore over time. There is a recurring family story that appears in different forms. A man builds a stable business over decades. He lives modestly. He could extract more profit, enjoy more luxury, loosen discipline, but he doesn't. When asked why, his answer is simple: because I am not the last one who will carry this. That sentence quietly reframes everything. Money, in this mindset, was not personal achievement. It was a bridge, something that connected generations rather than rewarding one. That understanding made selfish decisions harder to justify. In many families, the question behind every major financial move was not, "Is this good for me?" but, "Does this weaken or strengthen what comes after me?" That single shift filtered out countless short-sighted choices. Another story illustrates this clearly. A family owns a small but reliable enterprise. The founder reaches an age where selling would be lucrative. The offer is strong. The timing is good. Selling would simplify life dramatically. Instead, he delays. Not because the deal is bad, but because the business itself has become a training ground. Younger family members are learning responsibility, judgment, and restraint by participating in it. The business is no longer just a source of income. It is an educational system. Selling would produce money. Keeping it would produce people. That trade-off mattered. This long-term framing also shaped how inheritance was handled. Wealth was rarely transferred suddenly or without context. Instead, responsibility increased gradually. Children were expected to demonstrate understanding before receiving control. Access followed competence. There are many stories of parents who refused to shield heirs from reality. Children learned not only how money was earned, but how it was lost in earlier generations. They were told about mistakes, misjudgments, and moments of overconfidence. But these stories were not told to instill fear. They were told to build perspective. By the time wealth changed hands, it no longer felt magical or overwhelming. It felt familiar, manageable, heavy in the right way. Another subtle pattern appears in how families structured ownership. Assets were often held in ways that discouraged impulsive decisions. Shared ownership delayed access, and collective discussion slowed down choices. Speed was the enemy of continuity. This intentional friction protected wealth from emotion. One family story recounts how a younger generation wanted to make a bold investment using family resources. The idea was exciting. The potential upside was large, but the structure required consensus. Discussions stretched on. Concerns were raised, assumptions questioned. The deal eventually died. At the time, this felt frustrating. Years later, when similar ventures failed publicly, the value of that restraint became clear. The family lost an opportunity, but preserved its foundation. Long-term thinking also shaped lifestyle decisions. Families avoided lifestyles that required constant high income. They resisted defining normal by peak earning years. This ensured that children did not grow up expecting a level of spending that could not be sustained. Expectations were managed deliberately. There are stories of families who maintained the same living standards even as income rose significantly, not out of fear or guilt, but to prevent dependency on circumstances. Comfort was allowed. Fragility was not. This approach reduced generational shock. Children did not experience wealth as something that appeared suddenly and then vanished. So they experienced consistency. That consistency built trust, not just in money, but in the family system itself. Another powerful aspect of this mindset was how it reduced ego. When wealth is meant to outlive you, personal recognition matters less. Legacy replaces applause. Quiet success becomes preferable to visible dominance. This protected families from decisions driven by pride. Many financial disasters across history can be traced back to one root cause. Someone wanted to be remembered for being bold. Jewish families who endured preferred to be remembered for being careful. Carefulness doesn't inspire headlines, but it builds continuity. This long horizon also encouraged patience in younger generations. Children raised with the understanding that wealth was generational felt less pressure to rush. They didn't need to prove themselves immediately. They focused on competence first, ownership later. That patience reduced reckless risk-taking during early adulthood, a period when many fortunes are lost. Over time, this produced families where wealth moved steadily rather than violently. Gains were incremental. Losses were contained. The system absorbed shocks without breaking. Money became a stabilizing force, not a destabilizing one. What does this mean for someone living today? It means reconsidering the timeline behind your financial decisions. It means asking whether choices are optimized for your peak years or for durability across changing seasons of life. And it means recognizing that wealth built only for personal comfort is fragile. Wealth designed to extend beyond you demands restraint, but offers resilience in return. Ask different questions. If this continues after me, will it be stronger or weaker? Does this decision make life easier now, but harder later? Am I building something that depends on my constant effort, or something that can stand without me? You don't need vast resources to think generationally. You need clarity, patience, and humility. Thinking beyond the self changes behavior immediately. It slows decisions, it filters risk, it aligns money with purpose. The families who endured understood this deeply. They treated wealth as a relay, not a finish line. They ran their portion carefully, knowing someone else would take the next handoff. And that mindset transformed money from a personal reward into a lasting structure. And it remains one of the most powerful ways to build wealth that truly lasts. Chapter 8. Quiet wealth was the only wealth that survived. If there is one lesson that ties every previous chapter together, it is this. The wealth that survived was rarely the wealth that demanded attention. Across generations, Jewish families learned, sometimes painfully, that visibility attracts pressure. Attention invites scrutiny, and scrutiny, over time, creates risk. So while others announced success loudly, families focused on something far less glamorous. They focused on staying unnoticed. This was not secrecy driven by fear. It was discretion driven by intelligence. There are many stories of families who were financially comfortable but outwardly indistinguishable from their neighbors. Homes were modest, lifestyles were restrained. Nothing about them signaled unusual success. And that was intentional. And one family operated a profitable wholesale business for decades. They could have lived far more lavishly. Instead, they kept their lives predictable. When asked why they never upgraded, the answer was simple: because attention changes how people treat you. They had seen what attention did. It attracted opportunists, it attracted expectations, it attracted envy. None of those made life safer. Quiet wealth gave them control. Another story appears repeatedly across generations. A family becomes known for reliability, not affluence. People trust them, they pay on time, they honor agreements. They don't boast. As a result, opportunities come quietly, often before they're visible to the public. When markets tighten, these families are still included. When others are cut off, they are still trusted. Their wealth doesn't spike dramatically, but it doesn't collapse either. Silence becomes insulation. There are also stories of families who learned the cost of visibility firsthand. A generation that displayed success too openly attracted unwanted attention. Requests for help turned into demands. Partnerships formed for the wrong reasons. Pressure increased. Eventually, mistakes followed. The next generation adjusted. They lowered their profile. They stopped advertising success. They focused inward on systems, reserves, relationships, and slowly, stability returned. Quiet wealth was not just safer, it was easier to manage. When wealth is loud, decisions become performative. You spend to maintain an image. You grow to meet expectations. You take risks to avoid appearing stagnant. When wealth is quiet, decisions are practical. You grow when it makes sense, or you wait when it doesn't. That difference compounds. Another powerful pattern involved how families handled comparison. Quiet wealth reduced the urge to measure progress against others. Without constant exposure to external standards, families stayed anchored to internal ones. Their goals were defined privately. Their timelines were self-determined. This protected them from envy and impatience. One family story illustrates this well. During a period of widespread speculation, neighbors grew rich quickly. New buildings appeared. Lifestyles changed overnight. This family stayed the same. They watched, waited, and did nothing. When the cycle reversed, they were still standing. They hadn't missed out. They had opted out. Quiet wealth also shaped how families interacted with risk. Without the pressure to impress, so there was no need to chase dramatic returns. Investments were evaluated calmly. Opportunities that required publicity were avoided. Complexity was treated with caution. Simplicity was preferred, not because it was easy, but because it was controllable. Another recurring theme was how quiet wealth protected relationships. Families that avoided flaunting success were less likely to create resentment or imbalance within their communities. This preserved trust. And trust, as seen earlier, was a powerful financial advantage. Money moved more easily among those who did not weaponize it socially. Children raised in these environments learned something subtle but profound. They learned that wealth did not need to announce itself to be real. They learned that confidence did not require validation. And they learned that security felt better than admiration. These lessons shaped adulthood. As adults, they were less tempted by status purchases, less reactive to trends, less likely to overextend. Their financial lives were quieter, but far more resilient. Over generations, this discretion created a powerful asymmetry. Families who avoided attention avoided many of the forces that destroy wealth: scrutiny, pressure, imitation, and ego. They were free to move at their own pace. Quiet wealth also made recovery easier. When setbacks occurred, there was no public image to protect, no narrative to maintain. Adjustments could be made privately. Mistakes could be corrected without humiliation. That freedom mattered. In contrast, families whose wealth was tied to visibility found it harder to adapt. They delayed necessary changes to preserve appearances. They doubled down on failing strategies to avoid looking weak. Pride turned manageable problems into irreversible losses. Quiet wealth avoided that trap. It allowed humility. Humility allowed correction. Correction allowed survival. This is why, across history, the wealth that lasted longest often left the fewest traces. It didn't dominate headlines. It didn't produce legends. It simply continued. Generation after generation. What does this mean for someone living today? It means rethinking the relationship between success and visibility. It means recognizing that not everything valuable benefits from exposure. It means understanding that discretion is not weakness. It is leverage. You ask yourself different questions. Does this decision increase attention or stability? Does this choice require validation or stand on its own? Am I building something that looks impressive or something that lasts? Quiet wealth does not mean hiding or shrinking. It means choosing where attention is allowed to land. It means protecting your systems from unnecessary pressure. It means valuing resilience over recognition. In a world that rewards loud success, this lesson feels counterintuitive. But history is consistent. The wealth that survives longest is rarely the wealth that seeks applause. It is the wealth that moves carefully, the wealth that stays flexible, the wealth that grows quietly while others are distracted. That was the final pillar of generational wealth, and it remains one of the most practical lessons anyone can apply today, regardless of income, background, or ambition. Because in the end, the goal was never to be seen. The goal was to still be standing. When you step back and look at the full picture, one truth becomes clear. The way wealth was built across generations was not dramatic, fast, or loud. It was deliberate, patient, quiet. The families who endured did not rely on single moments of brilliance or extraordinary luck. They relied on posture, a posture toward money that treated it as responsibility rather than reward, knowledge rather than status, survival rather than maximum gain. They understood that wealth is not proven in good years. It is revealed in difficult ones. Across every chapter, the same pattern repeats. Money was handled with restraint. Knowledge was valued more than assets. Risk was evaluated by its downside, not its upside. Trust mattered more than exposure. Progress came through repetition, not breakthroughs. Spending followed principle, not emotion. And wealth was designed to outlive the individual. And above all, success stayed quiet. None of this was accidental. It was the result of generations observing what destroys wealth and deliberately choosing a different path. They saw how ego invites pressure, how visibility attracts risk, how speed creates fragility, and they chose patience instead. What makes these lessons powerful is not their historical origin, but their relevance now. We live in a world that rewards visibility, speed, and constant performance. We are encouraged to optimize everything, broadcast success, and chase growth aggressively. But the pressures of modern life, economic uncertainty, rapid change, emotional decision-making, are not new. They simply wear different clothing. And the strategies that allowed families to survive instability in the past still work because human behavior has not changed. If there is one takeaway, it is this: wealth that depends on perfect conditions will not survive imperfect reality. But wealth built to absorb stress, adapt to change, and move quietly has time on its side. You do not need to belong to a particular culture or tradition to apply these ideas. You only need to adopt the posture behind them. Ask yourself different questions. Is this decision making my life more flexible or more fragile? Am I building something that needs constant success or something that can survive setbacks? Does my relationship with money create calm or pressure? Quiet wealth is not about hating. It is about control. It is about choosing durability over drama, resilience over recognition, and continuity over applause. If you apply even a few of these principles consistently, the impact will not be immediate. And that is the point. What grows quietly is rarely noticed until it lasts longer than everything else. In the end, the goal was never to be impressive. The goal was to endure. And endurance, over time, becomes the most reliable form of wealth there is.